On a winter night when the mountains of Colorado were buried in silence and the wind whispered of forgotten miracles, a police officer and a young German shepherd stepped into the storm without knowing that one small boy was about to change all of their lives. In the frozen dark where the river clawed at the earth and the snow refused to stop falling, a choice was made between fear and courage, and that choice would echo through an entire town. This is not just a rescue story, it is a story of loyalty, hope, and the kind of love that appears when everything else disappears. So before the snow begins to fall again and the river starts to whisper its secrets, tell me, where are you watching from right now, and leave your comment below, because this story begins with you, here with us, and it will stay in your heart long after the last word is spoken. Ashwood Ridge, Colorado, lay under a sky that seemed too heavy for the mountains to carry. Snow had been falling for 3 straight days. Not drifting gently, but pouring as if the clouds had split open and were emptying their grief upon the earth. Streetlights glowed amber through the storm, their halos trembling in the wind, while the town itself moved slowly, like an old animal curling inward for warmth. Cars crawled along the main road, tires whispering across packed ice. Storefronts were shuttered early. The world had chosen silence. Officer Nathan Hale stood outside his patrol truck at the edge of Pine Street, collar turned up against the wind. He was 38, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of build that came from years of working mountain rescues and long nights on the force. His dark hair was already streaked with gray at the temples, and a thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a high-speed crash years earlier that had cost him a partner and a marriage. Nathan's face carried that history in the quiet lines around his eyes. He was not unkind, he was simply tired in the way men become when they have buried too many winters inside themselves. Behind him, in the open bed of the truck, stood Valor. Valor was a 3-year-old German shepherd, heavy-boned and powerful, with a thick winter coat the color of storm clouds and charcoal. His chest was broad, his paws oversized, and his amber eyes burned with a steady, intelligent fire that never seemed to blink for long. The left edge of his right ear bent slightly, a remnant from the night he had been found half frozen in a drainage culvert the winter before, abandoned, starving, but unwilling to die. That night had shaped him. He did not retreat from storms. He moved into them. "Easy, boy," Nathan murmured as Valor hopped down into the snow and pressed close to his leg. The dog's breath steamed in the air, his tail wagged once, low and controlled. He was alert but calm, the way dogs become when they sense that the world is about to tilt. Dispatch crackled through the radio. "Missing child report. 8-year-old male, Lucas Harper, last seen 40 minutes ago near Black Hollow Creek." Nathan closed his eyes for half a second. Black Hollow. He knew the place. A narrow ravine north of town where groundwater ran under the ice and kept parts of the creek dangerously unstable, even in deep winter. He keyed the mic. "I'm closest. Heading there now." Valor's ears lifted. The truck pushed through the snow toward the northern edge of Ashwood Ridge. The houses thinned. Pines crowded the road, their branches sagging beneath the weight of the storm. As they neared the creek trailhead, Nathan saw a small cluster of figures. Townspeople gathered under umbrellas and hoods, blue emergency lights cutting through the snowfall. At the center stood Sarah Harper. Sarah was 32, slim and pale, her dark hair pulled back in a messy knot beneath a knitted hat that had clearly been thrown on in panic. She wore an oversized parka and mismatched gloves. Her hands shook violently, not just from the cold. Sarah had been widowed 2 years earlier when her husband's logging truck slid off the highway during an ice storm. Since then, she had carried the world with a kind of brittle determination, polite to everyone, always apologizing, always afraid of being a burden. Now she clutched a small red mitten to her chest, like it was the only solid thing left in the universe. Officer Hale," she said when she saw him, her voice breaking into pieces. "Lucas went out back to build a snow fort. I was only inside making soup. I swear it was only a few minutes." Nathan knelt in the snow in front of her. His voice stayed steady. "Tell me what he was wearing." "Blue jacket, yellow boots, the dinosaur hat his grandmother sent him." Her eyes searched his face like a prayer. Nathan nodded and turned to Valor. He pulled a glove from his pocket and held it out. "Find him." Valor inhaled. His body went still. Then he turned sharply north and began to run. The forest swallowed them almost immediately. The trail disappeared under fresh snow, but Valor moved with certainty, nose low, muscles flowing beneath his coat. Nathan followed, boots sinking deep, breath burning in his lungs. The wind howled between the trees. Somewhere far above, thunder rolled through the clouds, muffled and distant. After 20 minutes of hard travel, Valor slowed. His tail stiffened. His ears rotated forward. He stopped. Nathan crouched beside him. "What is it, boy?" Valor stepped forward and pawed at the snow. Beneath it, the ground sloped sharply toward the ravine. The smell of water cut through the cold. Then they heard it, a sound too small for the storm, a thin, broken cry. "Lucas!" Nathan shouted. The sound came again. Down the embankment, through shattered ice and dark water, the boy was clinging to a ledge, his yellow boots half submerged, his face white with cold and fear. Pieces of broken ice bobbed around him like glass. Valor did not wait. He launched himself down the slope. Nathan's heart slammed into his throat as Valor slid, claws scraping uselessly against ice, then plunged chest-deep into the creek. The water roared around him, black and furious. Lucas screamed as the current tugged at his legs. Valor reached him in seconds. His jaws closed gently but firmly on the back of the boy's jacket, just below the hood. He planted his front paws against a slab of ice and pulled, muscles straining, teeth locked, holding Lucas above the water while the current clawed at them both. "Hold on!" Nathan yelled as he scrambled down the bank, hands bleeding from the frozen rock. He grabbed Lucas under the arms and heaved. Valor did not let go until Nathan had the boy. The three of them collapsed onto the snow, gasping, soaked, shaking violently as the storm screamed above them. Lucas's lips were blue. His breathing was shallow. Nathan stripped off his own coat and wrapped it around the child, then pressed his body close, trying to share warmth while Valor pressed in from the other side, his thick coat radiating heat. "Stay with me, kid," Nathan whispered. Lucas's eyes fluttered. Sirens wailed in the distance. Snow kept falling. Winter had not finished with them yet. The storm worsened after they pulled Lucas from the creek. The wind rose until it howled through the ravine like something alive, clawing at the trees, tearing loose powder from the branches and throwing it back into their faces. Snow fell sideways now, thick and blinding, turning the world into a white wall that swallowed distance and sound. The ravine became a narrow tunnel of chaos, and in its center lay a small boy wrapped in a police officer's coat, his breath fluttering like a fragile bird that might stop at any moment. Nathan Hale knelt in the snow, both hands locked around Lucas's tiny shoulders, feeling the unnatural cold of the child's body seep into his own skin. He had worked enough winter rescues to recognize the signs: the blue lips, the glassy eyes, the slow, shallow breaths, severe hypothermia. And worse, when Nathan pressed his ear against Lucas's chest, he could hear the faint, wet rattle of water in his lungs. Lucas whimpered, a sound so weak it barely escaped him. "I've got you," Nathan whispered, more to himself than the boy. "I won't let you go." Valor crouched on the other side of Lucas, his great chest heaving, water streaming from his coat. His paws were raw and bleeding where the ice had cut them, but he paid no attention. His amber eyes stayed fixed on the boy's face, his body curved protectively, his breath forming clouds of steam that mingled with the child's. Nathan stripped off his gloves, then his thermal shirt, stuffing both inside the coat around Lucas, building a cocoon of every ounce of warmth he could give. He signaled into the radio with fingers already losing sensation. "We have the child. Severe hypothermia, possible aspiration. Need extraction now." Static crackled. Then, "Rescue team is 10 minutes out." 10 minutes in this storm might as well have been 10 years. The wind screamed. Nathan pulled Lucas closer, rocking him gently, pressing his own frozen forehead against the boy's. "Lucas, listen to me. Stay awake. Think about your snow fort. Think about your mom. Sarah is waiting for you." The boy's eyelids fluttered. His lips moved. "Cold. I know. You're doing great." Valor lowered his head and pushed his muzzle under the edge of the coat, breathing directly against Lucas's cheek, his body trembling as if he were pouring his own life into the boy. Minutes dragged past in the white roar of the storm. Nathan's muscles began to cramp from the cold. He could no longer feel his feet. His vision blurred at the edges, but he did not move. He would not leave that spot, not now, not for anything. At last, through the snow, a dark shape emerged. The rescue sled, 2 EMTs pushing through the drifts, their headlamps slicing tunnels of light. "Here!" Nathan shouted. They worked fast, efficient, practiced. Heat packs, oxygen mask, thermal wrap. The moment Lucas was secured, Valor tried to climb onto the sled with him, his paws slipping, nails scraping metal. "Hey boy," one of the EMTs said, startled. "He stays with us," Nathan said immediately, his voice sharp, leaving no space for debate. "He kept the kid alive." The EMT hesitated for half a heartbeat, then nodded. "Fine, but keep him back from the equipment." Valor settled at the sled's side, shoulder pressed against Lucas's leg, refusing to move as they began the long push up the ravine toward the waiting ambulance. The ride into Ashwood Ridge was a blur of sirens and shaking metal. Nathan sat on the bench inside the ambulance, one hand gripping the rail, the other resting on Lucas's foot through the blanket, counting every breath. Valor lay on the floor at his feet, head lifted, eyes tracking every movement of the medics. Lucas's heart rate stabilized slightly, but his body temperature remained dangerously low. When they burst through the hospital doors, the world shifted from wild chaos to sterile brightness. Nurses rushed in. Orders snapped through the air. Lucas was transferred onto a gurney and rolled toward the ICU. Valor rose to follow. A nurse stepped into his path. "Sir, animals aren't allowed." Nathan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight in his eyes stopped her. "That dog saved him." The nurse looked at Lucas's pale face, at Valor's bloodied paws, at the police officer standing between them like a wall. After a moment, she nodded and stepped aside. They moved into the ICU. The night began. Doctors confirmed what Nathan already knew: severe hypothermia, water inhalation, risk of lung complications, unstable vitals. They warmed Lucas slowly, carefully, afraid of shocking his system. Machines beeped. Oxygen hissed. Tubes were placed. Nathan stood by the glass, unmoving, while Valor lay against the wall just outside the curtain, eyes never leaving the bed. Hours passed. The storm raged on outside the hospital windows, burying Ashwood Ridge deeper in white. Nathan's hands shook when the adrenaline finally faded. He sat in a chair beside the ICU door, shoulders slumping for the first time. Valor rose and placed his head on Nathan's knee, the great weight of him solid and grounding. "You did good," Nathan murmured, his voice hoarse. "You did real good." Valor's tail thumped once. In the early morning hours, Sarah Harper arrived. Her face was gray with exhaustion and terror, her boots still dusted with snow. She stopped when she saw Nathan, then Valor, then the ICU lights beyond the glass. Is he? "He's alive," Nathan said. "He's fighting." Her knees nearly gave out. She covered her mouth with both hands and sobbed soundlessly, shaking. She noticed Valor's bandaged paws. "That dog?" Nathan nodded. Sarah crossed the small space between them and knelt before Valor, tears spilling freely now. She did not touch him at first. She only looked at him, as if memorizing the shape of him forever. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing my boy back." Valor leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently against her chest. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, life refused to let go. Night settled over Ashwood Ridge like a lid being slowly pressed onto the world. Outside the hospital, the storm still ruled the mountains. Wind howled through the empty streets, piling snow against doors and windows until the town itself seemed buried inside a white grave. Inside the emergency wing, everything was too bright, too clean, too quiet for what was happening in the small intensive care room at the end of the corridor. Lucas lay surrounded by machines. His small body was wrapped in thermal blankets, tubes running from his arms and nose, his chest rising and falling in careful, fragile movements. His skin had lost its blue color, but the gray pallor of exhaustion remained, as if winter had left its fingerprint on him and was not yet ready to let go. Officer Nathan Hale sat in the chair beside the glass wall, his broad frame folded inward for once, hands clasped between his knees. The scar through his eyebrow was more visible under the fluorescent lights, and the shadows under his eyes made him look older than his 38 years. The storm had finally released him from its grip, but his body still shook from the cold and the aftermath of fear. At his feet lay Valor. The German shepherd had been cleaned and partially dried by a sympathetic nurse, but his thick coat still smelled of river water and pine sap. Both front paws were wrapped in white bandages, the red already blooming through in faint stains. He lay on his side, his head resting on his paws, amber eyes open, unblinking, fixed on Lucas through the glass, as if the boy were the only star left in the sky. They had tried to make Valor wait in the hallway. Nathan had refused. The hospital administration had hesitated. The head nurse, Margaret Lowell, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair tucked into a tight bun and the calm authority of someone who had shepherded 1,000 lives through their darkest hours, had finally stood in the doorway and watched Valor watch the boy. She had watched the dog's ears twitch at every beep of the monitor, his body tensing at every shift of the machines, his focus absolute and unbreakable. Then she had sighed and nodded. "Let him stay," she said. "If that child makes it through this, it's because he's not alone." And so Valor remained. Hour after hour, the longest night Nathan could remember unfolded in the quiet hum of machines and the distant rage of the blizzard beyond the walls. Doctors came and went in low voices. Dr. Elaine Porter, a thin woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a soft voice, explained the situation in careful words: severe hypothermia, aspiration of cold water, risk of pneumonia, and organ stress. They would monitor Lucas continuously. The next 24 hours were critical. Sarah Harper arrived shortly after midnight. She moved down the corridor like a ghost, her slender body wrapped in a borrowed coat, her dark hair loose around her pale face. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but there was a new steadiness in them now, the kind of strength that appears when there is nothing left to lose. Nathan stood as soon as he saw her. "Can I see him?" she whispered. He stepped aside so she could look through the glass. Sarah pressed her hand to the wall, her breath catching as she saw her son lying there, so small among all that machinery. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she did not make a sound. Her shoulders did not collapse. She simply stood and watched and stayed. Then she noticed Valor. The great dog lay at Nathan's feet, still as a statue, his gaze never leaving Lucas. "That's him," she said softly. "That's the one who held him." "Yes." Sarah knelt slowly, careful not to disturb him, and extended her hand. Valor turned his head, his amber eyes meeting hers. For a moment they simply regarded each other, a mother and the creature who had refused to let her child die. She touched his neck. "Thank you," she whispered. Valor leaned into her palm. The night crawled forward on aching legs. Nathan dozed in the chair for a few minutes at a time, his dreams full of rushing water and falling snow. Each time he woke, Valor was still there. Each time Sarah was still standing at the glass. Near 3 a.m, Lucas's heart rate dipped dangerously low. Alarms sounded, nurses rushed in. Dr. Porter followed. Nathan's chest tightened so hard he could barely breathe. Valor rose at once, his body tense, ears forward, a low sound rumbling in his throat. Not a growl, not a bark, but something raw and desperate. Sarah grabbed Nathan's arm. They watched as the medical team worked in a controlled storm of motion and quiet commands. After endless minutes, the alarm softened. The monitor stabilized. Lucas's breathing evened. No one spoke. Outside, the blizzard finally began to lose its voice. Dawn crept into Ashwood Ridge in thin, exhausted light. When the first gray rays slipped through the hospital windows, Nathan noticed that the wind had fallen silent. Snow lay piled against the glass like the remains of a war that had already passed. Dr. Porter emerged from the ICU room, her mask pulled down, her eyes tired but clear. "He's stable," she said. "He's not out of danger yet, but he's holding." Nathan closed his eyes and exhaled for what felt like the first time in a lifetime. Sarah pressed both hands to her face and wept. Valor sank back down at Nathan's feet, his body finally relaxing, his tail thumping once against the tile. The longest night had not won. Winter had loosened its grip, just enough. Morning did not arrive in Ashwood Ridge so much as it exhaled. The storm had spent everything it had in the night. Now the sky lay pale and exhausted above the mountains, clouds thinning into fragile streaks of silver and blue. Snow rested heavy on rooftops, fences, the hoods of cars, the branches of pine trees, and the whole town seemed to be holding its breath, unsure whether it was allowed to move again. Inside the hospital, the world was hushed. Nathan Hale had not slept. Not really. He sat in the same chair where the night had found him, shoulders slumped, hands folded loosely between his knees. His boots were crusted with ice, his jacket stiff from drying too fast in artificial heat. the scar through his eyebrow pulled faintly when he blinked, his face drawn with the quiet exhaustion of someone who had crossed a line between yesterday and tomorrow and barely noticed the crossing. At his feet lay Valor. The German shepherd's head rested on his bandaged paws. His amber eyes remained open, but the sharp edge of vigilance had softened. He had not moved from that spot in hours, not when nurses passed, not when Sarah whispered to him, not when the doctors came and went behind the glass wall of the ICU. He was anchored there, as if the floor itself would drift away if he lifted his weight. Beyond the glass, Lucas Harper lay still beneath his nest of blankets and tubes. His skin was no longer blue. It had returned to its own color, pale but alive. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor traced soft green hills and valleys across the screen. Oxygen whispered at his nose. The room glowed in the early light like a sanctuary. Sarah stood at the glass, one hand braced against the wall, her forehead resting against the cool surface. Her dark hair hung loose over her shoulders now, her face hollowed by fatigue and fear. Yet something new lived behind her eyes, a fragile spark of belief that maybe, just maybe, the world had not finished with her son. She turned when she felt Nathan behind her. "They said he's holding," she murmured. "He is," Nathan replied, "and he's stubborn, takes after his mother." The corner of her mouth lifted weakly. They stood together in silence while the sun climbed. Minutes passed. Then the monitor changed. Nathan noticed it first, a subtle shift in the rhythm, a tiny flutter where there had been only steady lines. Valor's ears lifted at the same instant, his head rising, his body stiffening with a sudden energy that rippled through him. Sarah's breath caught. What is that?" Before Nathan could answer, Lucas's fingers twitched. Just a little. But it was enough to break the world open. Sarah gasped and pressed her hands to her mouth. Nathan surged forward, heart hammering. Valor rose in one smooth motion and stepped closer to the glass, his tail lifting, his whole body trembling. Inside the room, Lucas's eyelids fluttered, once, twice. Then slowly, like a door that had been locked by winter itself, they opened. His gaze was unfocused at first, drifting across the ceiling, the light, the machines. His mouth moved, forming no sound. Sarah's knees buckled. "I'm here," she whispered through the glass, her voice breaking into pieces. "Lucas, Mommy's here." The boy's eyes shifted. They found the glass. They found her. "Mom," he croaked, the word barely audible even through the barrier of the room. Sarah sobbed aloud now, her hand slapping against the glass as if she could reach him through it. Nathan felt his own eyes burn, the tightness in his chest finally loosening after a night that had nearly crushed him. Valor let out a sound. Not a bark, not a whine. Something in between. Low, broken, full of relief and awe. When the nurses opened the door and allowed Sarah and Nathan inside, Valor followed without hesitation, though his paws slipped on the tile. He approached the bed slowly, carefully, his great head lowering until his nose hovered just inches from Lucas's face. Lucas turned his head and smiled. A small, tired, perfect smile. "Valor," he whispered. The dog leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently to the boy's arm. His tail wagged once, then again, stronger, until his entire body swayed with it. He licked Lucas's fingers softly, as if afraid the moment would shatter if he were not careful. Dr. Elaine Porter watched from the foot of the bed, her face composed but her eyes shining. "He's conscious. His vitals are improving. This doesn't mean the danger is gone, but it means he's fighting." Lucas looked at Nathan. "Did we win?" Nathan swallowed hard. "We're getting there, kid." Lucas closed his eyes again, the effort of waking already draining him, but his hand remained wrapped in Valor's fur as if anchoring himself to the world. Outside the window, the snow glittered beneath the pale sun. For the first time since the storm had begun, Ashwood Ridge seemed to remember how to breathe. The snow did not leave Ashwood Ridge all at once. It loosened its grip slowly, like a wounded animal retreating from a fight it could not finish. In the days that followed Lucas's awakening, the storm became a memory told in soft voices. Snowbanks sagged along the roads. Icicles dripped from the eaves of buildings. The sky, once a lid of steel, softened into pale winter blue. And inside the small mountain hospital, life began the patient work of repairing itself. Lucas's recovery was not simple. For the first week, he barely spoke. His lungs burned from the cold water he had swallowed. His legs trembled when the nurses tried to stand him. There were moments when the fear returned in his eyes, when the sound of wind rattling the windows made his small body stiffen in the bed as if the river were still pulling at him. Nathan was there every day. He came after each shift, boots echoing down the corridor, the smell of pine and winter following him in. He would sit beside the bed and talk to Lucas about nothing important at all, about the mountains, about his old patrol dog, about the first time he ever saw snow fall on the Rockies and thought the sky had broken open. And at the foot of the bed, Valor stayed. The German Shepherd had been officially taken off duty after the rescue. His front paws were still wrapped, the pads raw and cracked from the ice, and a deep gash on his chest had required stitches. The veterinarian warned Nathan that Valor would need weeks of rest, maybe longer. Working dogs were not built for rivers in winter. Their bodies carried the scars of every mission. Valor did not seem to care. Each morning when Sarah arrived, he lifted his head. Each time Lucas stirred, his ears twitched. When Lucas cried out in his sleep, Valor rose instantly, pressing his head to the boy's arm until the fear drained from him again. The nurses began calling the room the Miracle Suite. Word spread quickly in a town as small as Ashwood Ridge. By the second week, people started arriving with food, casseroles wrapped in foil, bags of groceries, blankets, handmade cards. Children from Lucas's school sent drawings, stick figures of a boy, a police officer, and a giant dog standing in falling snow. The local bakery dropped off a cake iced in blue and white with a single word written across the top: Hero. Nathan tried to discourage the attention at first. He had never been comfortable in the spotlight, neither had Valor, who responded to praise by leaning closer to Lucas as if hoping no one would notice him at all. But the town would not be turned away. At the elementary school, the principal, Mrs. Eleanor Finch, a stout woman in her 60s with iron-gray curls and a voice that carried across gymnasiums, hung a photograph of Valor in the front hallway. In it, the dog stood beside Lucas's hospital bed, his bandaged paws resting on the blanket, amber eyes calm and steady. Below the picture, she placed a small plaque: Our Winter Guardian. Students stopped and stared at it every morning. The local paper ran the story on the front page. Police dog saves boy from frozen creek. A reporter from Denver called, then another. Nathan declined every interview, but Lucas didn't. One afternoon, while the winter sun spilled through the hospital windows and turned the walls gold, a young journalist named Maya Collins arrived with a camera and a notebook. She was in her late 20s, sharp-eyed, kind-voiced, and gentle with her questions. She sat on the edge of the bed while Lucas told the story in halting pieces, his hand buried deep in Valor's fur the entire time. He didn't leave me, Lucas said simply, even when it hurt. Maya knelt in front of Valor, lowering the camera. What's his name? Valor, Lucas replied, pride lifting his tired face. The name traveled far beyond Ashwood Ridge that evening. Donations began arriving at the shelter where Valor had been found the year before. Toys, dog food, winter coats for strays. Letters addressed in careful handwriting to Valor, the bravest dog in the world. Through it all, Valor remained what he had always been: quiet, watchful, anchored to Lucas's side. 3 weeks after the rescue, the doctors finally cleared Lucas to return home. The discharge papers felt unreal in Sarah's hands, as if she might blink and see them dissolve into snow. She packed the small pile of belongings they had collected: clothes, drawings, stuffed animals, a stack of get-well cards nearly as tall as Lucas himself. Nathan stood at the doorway with Valor when the nurse wheeled Lucas into the hall. The boy's face was brighter now, his voice stronger, but he did not let go of Valor's fur. When the elevator doors opened, half the staff of the hospital stood waiting, clapping softly. Someone had placed a blue ribbon around Valor's neck. The dog lowered his head, embarrassed, then stepped closer to Lucas's chair, as if asking permission to continue being exactly who he was. Outside, the town waited. Snow crunched under boots. The sky glowed pale and clean. As Sarah helped Lucas into the truck, she looked at Nathan and felt something heavy lift from her chest for the first time in months. At home, life returned in slow, careful pieces. Lucas slept often. He practiced walking around the living room, one small hand resting on Valor's back for balance. Neighbors dropped by with soup and cookies and quiet hugs. Evenings were spent on the couch, cartoons playing softly while Valor lay across Lucas's feet, his body a living wall between the boy and the world. One night, after Lucas fell asleep, Sarah stood in the doorway watching them. Valor lay half on the floor, half on the rug, his head resting inches from the bed, eyes half closed but never fully sleeping. She whispered to Nathan, "He's more than a dog." Nathan nodded. He had known that for a long time. 2 weeks later, Nathan received the official notice from his department. Valor was being retired from active duty. His injuries, combined with the psychological toll of the rescue, made his return to full service uncertain. The department offered to place him with a certified handler or a therapy organization. Nathan did not hesitate. He signed the papers himself. Valor came home with him. When Lucas heard the news, he cried, not from fear this time, but from happiness so sharp it hurt. "He's ours?" he asked. Nathan smiled. "He's family." The town gathered the following Saturday in the small community hall. Balloons floated along the ceiling. A banner stretched across the stage. "Thank you, Valor." Lucas sat in the front row with Sarah and Nathan, his feet not yet reaching the floor. Valor lay beside him, wearing his blue ribbon and a new tag that simply read, "Guardian." People spoke. The mayor, the school principal, the fire chief. But the loudest moment came when Lucas stood up, his voice trembling but clear. "He saved me," the boy said, "and he stayed." Valor lifted his head. The entire hall rose in applause. Winter had taken much from Ashwood Ridge, but it had not taken this. Spring did not arrive in Ashwood Ridge all at once. It crept in quietly, the way healing always does. At first it was only the sound of water, a soft, patient trickle beneath the ice where Black Hollow Creek had once raged. Then the snow on the rooftops began to sink into itself. The mountains loosened their white grip, revealing dark rock and evergreen needles. The air no longer cut like broken glass, it only whispered. 3 months had passed since the storm. Lucas Harper stood at the edge of the creek now, his boots planted on the thawing ground, his breath rising in the cool morning light. He was taller than he had been in the hospital bed, his cheeks rounder, his eyes brighter. The shadows of winter no longer lived in them. Beside him stood Valor. The German shepherd's scars had faded beneath his thick spring coat, but the slight bend in his ear remained, a permanent signature of the life he had lived. He wore a simple leather collar now, the metal tag at his throat catching the sun. It read only one word. Guardian Officer Nathan Hale stood a few feet behind them, hands in the pockets of his jacket, watching the two figures against the shining water. His hair had been cut shorter, the gray at his temples more noticeable now, but the heaviness in his posture had lifted. He breathed easier in this place. For the first time in many winters, he felt like the world had stopped asking him to be made of stone. The creek was calm, nothing like the monster it had been. Lucas knelt and dropped a thin branch into the water. It floated, lazy and harmless, drifting toward the bend where the trees leaned low. "I used to think the water hated me," Lucas said quietly. Valor's ears flicked. "But I think it was just scared too," the boy continued, glancing at Nathan. "Everything gets scared sometimes." Nathan smiled. "Even grown men and big dogs." Valor thumped his tail. Lucas waded into the shallows, only ankle deep, his hand brushing the surface. The cold made him laugh. He looked back at Valor. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to go in." Valor stepped forward anyway, one paw, then another. The water curled around his legs. He paused, body tense, eyes locked on the current. A memory lived in those muscles. Ice, darkness, the weight of a child's life in his jaws. Lucas reached out and pressed his hand into Valor's thick fur. "You're safe," he whispered. Valor took another step, then another, until he stood beside the boy, the water shimmering around them both. Nathan's chest tightened as he watched, not with fear, with something gentler, heavier, gratitude. They stayed there for a long time, just the three of them, the past and the present and the future standing at the edge of what had nearly been lost. Later, they followed the trail back toward the truck. Valor trotted ahead, carrying the branch Lucas had thrown, proud as any warrior returning from battle. Lucas skipped beside Nathan, his small hand swinging in the man's larger one. "Best day ever," Lucas declared. Nathan squeezed his hand. "Yeah, kid. Best day." When they reached town, Ashwood Ridge was alive with the ordinary magic of spring. Windows were open, Laughter spilled from the cafe on Main Street. Children rode bikes in the melting snow. Life had returned to its proper volume. At home, Sarah Harper waited on the porch, sunlight in her hair. She had changed too, her shoulders straighter, her smile no longer fragile. When she saw Lucas and Valor, she pressed her hand to her chest and laughed. "You look like explorers." Lucas ran to her. Valor followed. That evening they ate dinner outside. The sky turned gold, then lavender. The air smelled of pine and soil and new beginnings. Lucas sprawled on the grass afterward, tracing clouds with one finger while Valor rested his head on the boy's stomach, the steady rhythm of the dog's breathing rising and falling beneath Lucas's hand. Nathan stood at the edge of the yard, watching them, his thoughts wandering to places he had avoided for years. To the winter he lost his partner, to the crash, to the long nights of believing the world only took things and never returned them. He realized he had been wrong. Sometimes the world gives back everything that matters. As the stars appeared, Lucas yawned. "Will Valor stay forever?" he asked sleepily. Nathan smiled. "As long as he wants." Valor lifted his head at the sound of his name, eyes soft, then rested it again. Inside, Lucas fell asleep within minutes, Valor curling on the rug beside the bed, his body forming a protective curve. Nathan stood in the doorway, listening to the boy's steady breathing, to the quiet strength of the dog's presence. He whispered, "Thank you." Valor's tail thumped once. Outside, the last of the winter snow melted into the earth. Ashwood Ridge slept, and somewhere between the fading cold and the coming warmth, a family, born of a storm, a river, and a dog who refused to let go, finally found its way home. Winter had taken its hand from their lives, at last. At the end of this story, we are reminded that miracles do not always arrive with thunder and light. Sometimes they come quietly in the shape of loyalty, courage, and a heart that refuses to let go. God works through the smallest of his creations to protect what matters most. And when we open our eyes, we begin to see that his hand is present in our daily lives, in every moment of kindness, every act of love, and every choice to stand firm when the storm is strong. If this story touched your heart, let it be a reminder to trust in God's timing, to believe in second chances, and to walk each day with faith and gratitude. Please share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us what part spoke to your heart. And do not forget to subscribe to our channel so we can continue sharing stories of light and healing. May God bless every person watching and guide you safely through every storm. And if you believe in miracles and the power of love through God, please comment Amen below.